Hello everyone. So we're going to be going over how to save to the database. There's a SQLite database embedded within Conan, and it stores all of the things like where objects are when you place them, player information, general information. Well, you can also save your own data. One of the things you have to do is attach a ActorPersistence component to your actor, which will let you save some data from it, variables and all that. So we're going to go through that. There's a lot to cover, so I'm going to hop through some of the stuff. I'm going to basically be automating, pasting in, but none of the important stuff, just things like the GUI bits. So let's dive right in. Very first thing we want to do is talk about that first component. So let's go over to the folder for your mod. I'm going to start by creating, first I need to know what I'm saving. So I'm going to create a structure. I'm going to call it structure, let's call it DB record definition. I'm just picking names randomly. So we're going to call this, we're going to add message of the day, and it's going to be a string. And we'll see, welcome to the server. So that's our initial value. This is essentially what we're going to be saving later. So let's save that off. It's just a definition, but we're going to be using it to pass data into and out of the database. So the next thing we need is an actor. So let's create a new blueprint class based on actor. And we're going to call this BP database. So inside of this blueprint, we're going to put things like the persistence. We have to put a variable that refers to the SDB record definition, and then set a bunch of values, mostly save game on the variable and making sure everything is replicatable. One of the things I want to do for this video is replicate the results up to the server, so that way we store the data on the server rather than the clients. You can obviously store on the clients as well. They have their own database, but we're shooting for a message of the day for this particular one. So let's add a component. We're going to go down to actor persistence. The actor persistence, this guy will let you replicate out data. You see it has a UID. That's actually the row ID. So we're going to have to generate one of those as part of the stuff we need to do. We're also going to need to add a variable. This is what data we're going to store. We're going to call this the DB record, and we're going to mark it public so we can get to it elsewhere. And this is going to be our SDB record definition, a reference to that. So a couple things we're going to need. First, save game. That lets us know that it should be saved into the database and also replicated. This is really important, or it won't replicate the data. It'll act like it will, but I assure you it does not. So the initial value is going to be, so let's do a couple things to set this up. The very first part of this is going in and on begin play, making sure we have unique ID. So let's go into, into the event graph on begin play. Let me get rid of these. We're not going to need those for right now. So on begin play, first we need to find out, does it have an ID? So let's get a reference to actor persistence. This is the thing that's going to need the ID. So we say get unique ID. Then is valid ID. And these are provided by Funcom. They're basically helper functions that are part of the database system. You notice they're in Dreamworld persistence. So that's the wrapper for the database. So we need a branch. This branch is going to decide whether it's valid. If it is valid, great, we can use it. If it's not, though, then we're going to have to create it. So let's do that first. So we're going to generate a unique ID. I believe what this is doing is going out to the table, finding the highest unique ID in the table, and then creating a new one, and then inserting a row. Well, not inserting it yet. You need to set it and set it to dirty. So we're going to do that next. So once we have it, then we say set unique ID, and we need to set it to the value that we got back here. This actor is a reference to self. This doesn't automatically refer to self, so you have to set it explicitly. Now we need to set it to dirty. Setting something dirty, in this case, will tell the ActorPersistence that something has changed. So you're going to go in and basically tell it, okay, let's write it out. Set dirty flag. And you see it's already got a reference to ActorPersistence. Dirty is going to be true. Now, the next step we're going to need to do is whenever there's data loaded, we want it to raise an event and update the variable. So we're going to create a custom event called data loaded. This is just whenever the database is loaded and gets new data. Inside of this, if that has a unique ID, we're just going to get a reference and bind to that particular custom event. So we can say bind event on signal. No, you're going to be difficult, aren't you? Oh, it's because I don't have a reference to this guy. Bind event to on signal data loaded. So it knows that this ActorPersistence has an on signal data loaded. If we click on it, we can see it has two. The on signal data loaded and pre-save. They are exactly what they sound like. So here we're going to go, okay, great. Now we're good. Now we raise the event. We're going to tie this back to this event, this custom event, and say that those two are attached to each other, or assigned, I guess is the right terminology. We need to do the exact same thing here. And we're going to set that there. Target is going to be ActorPersistence again. Actually, sorry, that is incorrect. It's actually going to be, no, that's correct, but let's use this one. It's a little less horrible looking, a little better routing. Okay, so let's tie the little far stretch. Let's tie the event over here. Now at this point, we've gotten all of the system set up. We've created a unique ID, and now we're actually going to go out and do an update to all of the clients. So whenever there's a change, we want to do a basic push out to all of the clients. All right, so the next step is to go into the data loaded and do, actually let's create a new custom event. Oops, custom event. And we're going to call this DB update. So whenever there's a database update, we want to push it out to the clients. So pushing out to the clients, we're going to tell this to multicast. That'll, if we're on the server, that will replicate the information out to all of the end clients. So next piece is we need to call that method from here. So our DB update is going to go in, and we're going to call that from here. We're just going to say DB update, which is a function call, but it's a function call out to the clients. So this guy actually is going to need, I missed one important step. This actually should take in the data that we care about sending. So it's great that we send data, but what are we sending? So we're going to call this the DB record, which is going to be type of S, DB record definition. So I realized I made a small little error on DB record. I want to call this active DB record so I know the difference between the parameters I'm passing in and the one that's stored in memory in that spot. So now that we have the active record set in the variables, we're going to go in, pass in DB record. That's looking great. Now the next step is we need to tell it what was passed in. The next thing we're just going to feed this the DB record, the active DB record, so that's what gets passed out. Target itself looks great. Next I want to let's set whenever there's a DB update. Remember, this is happening on the client. Should be multicast. So at this point we can go out and say I want to actually, let's just drag this over here, and then we can set the dirty flag on it. So this will update the local database of wherever you're at. So a quick review. The top portion here is initializing the object. In this case, the actor it's deciding if it needs a unique ID or if it has to generate one. So we're going to go in and do a, oops, I'm going to select all this. You can hit C to do comments. So we're just going to say initial DB setup. Next up is data load. And then finally, we'll just call this client database updates. Let's compile it, make sure everything works. Review on this guy, you have to have actor persistence in here. In the variable down here, you need to set it to save game and replication if it's replicated. In this case, this is. And it's just pointing at the record we created earlier, the struct we created earlier. So that's it for this. Now we need a couple things. One, it would be nice to know how to set this guy up. An important thing is you can't just drag it and drop it in the level. Levels may change. You need this to live outside of that. So we're actually going to put it into the player controller. So fun combat player controller. I don't know if that's a cute play on words or not, but okay. So one of the very first things we need to do in the player controller is set it up to handle the server event. So this guy has to live DB write. Oops, sorry. I'm going to create a custom event. And we're just going to call this a DB write. And inside of here, we're going to say that this happens on the server, that it's reliable. That's really important. And we're going to pass in that DB record, which is, of course, the S_DB record definition. And then the next thing, I actually need to either go out, find it, or create it. For this, I like to create a little helper function. So let's go over and create a blueprint function library. So blueprint function libraries, very quickly, DB helper. These guys are essentially static functions that you can just put any old thing into. I'm going to do something called get database, which will do a quick lookup for me. So the database lookup will go out And we actually need to find this thing, this BP database, no matter where it lives. So the first thing we're going to do is search across everything and say get all actors of class. And then part of that is to say which class, which is the BP underscore database. And then at this point, we're going to get an array of actors. So I'm going to do get from the array. I'm going to try grabbing the first element. I want to see is valid. See if this is valid. You could also check the length. I prefer this method. The next thing is a branch to decide what I'm going to do with that. And that's going to be based on the results of this. Now, if it's true, if it is valid, then, we need to set up a return for this method. So output is going to be again, this is our data. So let's call it database. This is our BP underscore database reference. Okay, so now we've got a return node. If we did find it, great. Let's bring it here and let's throw a reference to that. However, if we did not find it, then we need to return a null. So we're just going to do a return and just return nothing. And that will let us get through that piece. So this is a nice little helper. So let's hop back over here where we're doing our database write. And this is essentially the method on the server that will write to the database. One moment. Okay, so first I need to look up the database. And we see here in our DB helper that we have this method which will return me my database. So now I need to make sure that it's valid. That's not the one I wanted. All right, and then we're going to drop this guy on there. All right, now if it is valid, great. Then I want to set my active DB record. That's the variable inside of there. So let's do, actually I'm going to need to grab from the database. I'm going to say set active DB record. Okay, and that's going to be to the variable that was passed in. So that'll set that, and that's on is valid. Great, looking good. Let's move this up to make it a little easier to understand. And then the next thing we need to do is save this off. So we're going to say set dirty flag again. This guy in, so the target in this case is going to be persistent database, and I think that's good. Now the next bit, we actually need to go in. If it does not exist, it's not valid, then we actually need to go out and spawn this object. So that means we didn't find it. So the very first thing we do is say spawn actor from class. Now the class in this case is going to be our BP database. And we do need to transform, even though it doesn't need a position, it's a required value. So we pass that guy in with all zeros. The other piece we need to do is we need to pass in the player pawn as the instigator. And this matters a lot because we're going to be doing network replication, and ownership matters with network replication. I implore you to go and read. It is a very fun topic. Not really, but you'll learn a lot, I guess. So next up, now we've spawned this guy. we're going to set that, and we need to get the active DB record and set it down here. Okay, it doesn't look too bad. Next up, we need to set the dirty flag. So set dirty flag on that guy. In this case, we have the persistent actor again, which is going to derive from this. And we're going to say, yes, it's dirty. All right. So I think that's pretty much all we're going to need here. And that gives us the ability to do a write. So let's put some comments in and just say database write. And down here, let's call this spawn persistent DB actor. All right, so that gets us to the point where we can write. Looking good. We're going to compile, make sure it actually is not messed up in some horrible way. Let's save that guy. Let's save everything. All right, so at this point we've got our actor, we've got our player controller for instantiating this guy. We have a little helper function. So the next step is we actually need to write to it. So I'm going to create a small form update to allow message of the day entry. So let's go to the in-game menu, and this is where we're going to save a little bit of time in that I've already constructed something that looks not atrocious, and I'm just going to paste it in here. Maybe. I hope you're not going to be difficult. Oh, thank you so much. Oh, of course you're not going to let me move you, are you? Thank you. There we go. All right, great. Okay, I think that'll do nicely. Hopefully the text shows up pretty well. So now we've got a little UI. Let's actually attach it to some code. So when it first goes in, we have the construct event. That'll actually construct the UI. We have a sequence of things going on here. We're just going to add a new pin to that to do our work. So the very first thing I want to do is whatever the message of the day is, I want to set it to that text box. So first we need to do the get database from our DB helper. Make sure that's valid. If everything is good with this guy, then we can go out and we can do a set text. Nope. Let's grab our text box. We're going to do a get. And then let's do from here our set text. And that's on is valid. And the text is actually going to be the value coming back from this guy, which is target, nope, which is going to be our active DB record. And then now this guy needs to be broken out. So we can actually just right click on here and split the pins. In this case, there's only message of the day. Incidentally, if you update the struct with more than just message of the day, then you can have many things in here. So we have a little convert in there, and off it goes. So that should update it with whatever the value is that's currently an active DB record whenever this form is loaded. So next up, and let's put a nice comment on this guy. Initialize Motd text box. All right, so down at the bottom we have this big array of buttons, the buttons that do all of the things. I have a save message of the day button, we're going to drop that guy. Actually, I want to do an on-click on this guy. I can't see it. Unclicked. So whenever they click the message of the day save button, first thing we need to do is get the player controller. So keep in mind, this is what we were setting up earlier on the cast to Fun Combat player controller. So we got to make sure that it's valid, that we actually got the class we thought we did. Let's see. I probably do this as pure. Nope. Okay. I guess they didn't mark it as pure or whatever. All right. So now we can do that. Check and see if it's valid. If it is, then we need to make sure that they're admins, because I only want admins setting this. So off of the player controller, we can check can cheat. Inside of the player controller, you can also check is admin. So can cheat, we're going to need a branch, and then anybody else we're just going to ignore. Next, we need to call on that player controller, which I'm going to need to drag this over and say db write. That's a function call. If they are admin, then we're going to set, so we need to do a get text. So let's grab our text box. Let's do a get text to grab the text box text. And so for this, because it's a struct, we actually need to do make dbs underscore db record definition. So if you had multiples, like message of the day and rules and all kinds of other stuff, you may have to go to other sources to update it. You can update it all at once. You may read from it, split it, feed it back in, and then make a new one. But you definitely have to do a make of some kind to populate it, or grab an existing one and update it. I'm just going to do this. Figure out whatever's right for your project. All right, so we're going to feed that guy in. And at this point, everything should be working. Let's throw a little comment around this guy and say Motd save. All right, so let's compile it. Save it, save all, and see how we did. So Control-Shift-M to get your thing up. We're just going to put ASDF in there. Looks like it's not replicating, so we'll have to take a look and see what's going on there. Important note, I'm running a dedicated server from the simulation, from the play-in editor. This is really good if you want to check that you're actually writing to the right places. All right, so let's make sure that our update is multicast. It is. That looks good. Make sure the generating the IDs is right. Make sure that this guy is set to replicate it and saving the game. I feel like I'm missing something else as well. This guy has to be set to replicates. All right, I think that will probably take care of it. So let's compile and give another run. And I think probably always relevant should be in there. Oh yeah, there it goes. So now it's doing its stuff. Yep, looks great. Every time we load, we pull something else in. Test data, save it off, and there it goes. And if we exit out, come back in, and I'm almost dead, but we'll hop in real quick. test data is there again. So we definitely saved it off. Okay, so let's take a look at the database itself that I just saved. This is a sample. I did one earlier rather than going through and finding the actual one. In the database, there's a bunch of different tables. By the way, DB browser for SQLite, great free option for looking at your SQLite database. Inside of the save folder, you'll find the database along with logs, same place you put your mods. So you'll find in here a properties table. In that properties table is a whole bunch of different values. These are all the things that ActorPersistence is used to save. So anything you have ActorPersistence, this is the unique ID, and this is the class, and then this is the variable. So my earlier class was called BP Saver, and then it was DB Record was my variable. If we look in the blob, it actually saves the value. This is a struct just like the other one. And you see in here message and string property and all the rest of that stuff. So that'll let you get the data. And that's pretty much it. Please let me know if I did anything obviously wrong here. It does cook and run on an external server. Everything should be working as is. But please let me know if I've missed anything. I tried to abstract this, but it didn't work as well as I wanted to. That's why I put everything in the player controller. There is a ton of weird things going on. So please let me know if you have a better solution. I would love to hear it. But this is the basics of getting something into the database. Thanks a lot, guys.